Now, it's really interesting to talk about living with ETs, and if we ever could have an experiment like that, it's been done. I'm going to talk about the Italian one because I was the only journalist in America to go and interview the people that were involved. Plus, Stefano Brescia, that wrote Mass Contacts and 50 Years of Amicizia, left me his PowerPoint, and he left me the voices of the aliens, so you'll hear that too. He left me the audio files for that. But I am very interested in this subject of human type aliens interacting with citizens of the planet, because it started happening in Giant Rock in Landers, California in 1953. 1952, 53. I have all the photos. 33,000 people used to go, and who used to speak were George Adamski, George Van Tassel, um, uh, and what's his name, Orfeo Angelucci, Howard Menninger, all these guys that had contact with people, people type people from other planets. In Howard Menninger's case, and I had done extra work on that, and 3 years ago I went to High Bridge in New Jersey to see where Val Thor was sitting, because I have so many photos of him and the other two aliens that were sitting there listening to a lecture of 100 people, that I had to go to the house. The house is empty. I had to go pick up all the old photos and see where everything was. So were there visitations from people? Yes, in 1950s in Southern California, in 1956 in Italy, in 1973, you people that want to go on Patreon and look at the Brit Elders Billy Meyer stuff. She did 7 years of research on Billy Meyer. Those were Pleiadians. They were human people that came to see Billy Meyer. The father even had facial hair. If you look at the details, she talks about it. It's fascinating. 1970, you've got to look at the dates. In 1972 to today, in the Chilca Desert in Peru with Sisto Paz Wells, his brother Charlie, Ricardo Gonzalez, all the Latin American contactees. Now, I don't have time to talk about it because I went there. I went to the Chilca Desert. I went to the Atacama Desert. I went to Argentina. I went to Colombia. And I spoke to these original people, had original face-to-face, what you call face-to-face with these beings. Because I can't read it from a book. I can't pick up a phone. I can't just, to have an opinion based on no information, I think is total ignorance. I have to speak to the actual people. So I have to, and they have to tell me whatever the story is, whether I want to, whether it's hard to believe or not. And some of the stuff is very difficult for me. But when you get the actual testimony, to me, actual witness testimony is the only way to go. Did I go to see Billy Meyer? Yes. And you can't make opinions on that. My colleagues are so ignorant. They don't even understand there was metal involved. There was movies involved. You see the highway with the craft on top, and you're going to see that here. You're going to see the film footage here of that. Now, there is a documentary, folks, and there is the link on top. It's a 2-hour documentary. You see the link on the chat? I think it's free. It's on Apple TV, I think. I put it there for you because you're going to actually experience everything with friendship if you watch that documentary. It's very well done. UFO TV did it. So I've got that for you. Then I've got the written part, which, I'm going to read a little bit about it. And you can download that for your friends. And then for the people that are scholars, read these 2 books. It's in here. And I've got Octavio Ortiz's name because this happened in Chile, except the ETs that went to see Octavio, he said they were tall, very tall, but they were very German looking. He said their hair was very short, and they came and told him that they were on the island of Chiloé and they were working with healing technologies. And that's in the archipelago there in Chiloé. It's near Patagonia. So if you want to study all the friendship cases, they weren't just in Italy, And okay, so I'm looking at the end. Do you have any questions of the attendant? Do you no? Patreon has no interaction right now, and basically because I've had to depend on volunteers to help me with it. I have no idea how it works. Thank God I know how to use YouTube, and thank God I know how to use Zoom, because I've had very little help with technicians who want to help me with anything, and it's very difficult for me. I've survived it. I don't know how. All right, so the friendship case is the world's longest running case of alien contact. And it's 1956 for 20 years. It involves people other than, it involves more people that haven't even come out yet. It continues today throughout the world. There are completely physical contacts with people of other worlds, not mystical channelings, they weren't, or speculations. These facts make Amicizia, which is the Italian word for friendship, a unique Rosetta Stone for understanding UFO phenomena and humanity's place in the cosmos. The book from Stephano, who was an engineer, he's very cut and dry engineer. He was involved too, though. It came out in 2009, and it turned ufology upside down. Before he died, and I told you he had cancer because he had lung cancer. He was a very good friend of mine. He wrote the book with clear descriptions of everything. And what I'm going to go and do right away is try to work with screen share. So bear with me, because in screen share, I can give you much more detail. And I'm hoping, if you can't hear something, don't worry. You know, I'll give you the video and you can hear it in the video. This is Stephano. This is Stephano Brescia, the author, the engineer. This is Stephano. This is me interviewing the Gaspare di Lama, who at that time, and it's on my YouTube channel. I'm going to give you the links, in Lake Como. You're going to hear me talk to him, because I'm going to click on the YouTube thing. You're going to hear me ask him questions. And it was hard because he was answering, I speaking Italian. I tried to translate at the very same time. But I want to tell you, this is a part, and I'm the only one that covers any of this stuff, of the human-alien interaction that was before 1963, before Betty and Barney Hill, and Antarel from Mapu, the Ashtar Command. Antarel, these are Latin Americans. These are Latin American contacts. This is Omniac, is a Latin American contact. Semyazi, this woman right here, is Billy Meyer. And ask if these two women were, for the Billy Meyer case, there is an actual photo of Aska. So I had to cover the human type stuff, because I said, how come I go to Latin America and there's no gray aliens? And then I remembered that in 1963, the CIA got involved with abduction stuff, and it went right down south with all abductions, and you don't know that we had contact with human type beings, which, you know, is so important to understand. But you probably weren't even born yet. And the conferences of the contactees in America, the Van Tassels and the Mengers and the Adamskis, isn't even talked about by my colleagues. And what, there were 33,000 people at those contacts. It was just amazing. So anyway, here's a very, and I hope I can get it on YouTube here to let you hear it, because this is the short.
Rispettosissimi a non forzarci e a lasciarci liberi.
So they were very respectful this time around to make sure that they left everybody free to decide if they wanted to make this shift. Allora hanno scelto le persone che volevano, con cui volevano fare questo punto. Ma guarda, no?
Non c'eravamo solo noi, 20 in Italia.
Eravate veramente 20, io pensavo fosse 10. There were 20 people. Signora, eri l'unica donna o c'erano quante donne c'erano?
Guarda.
I asked how many women because I heard that it was 10 men.
Io, lei e mia mamma.
Domani lavora, president Stefano Stocksteady, his wife, and his mother. Swiss guy is one of his, and then
YouTube channel. And what's interesting is that when I interviewed him, I didn't know there were women involved, because if you listen to the introduction to this, it was 10 Italian men, but it was 20. He told me 20. Now this man is dead now. He's dead. Gaspare di Lama died. I mean, I got to him before, he was in his 90s. I mean, it's incredible. But it's just a totally, he's not lying. I mean, you can tell he's telling the truth about this whole entire case. And there's two parts to it, and I'm trying my very, 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 very best to translate it into English. It didn't work because I speak Italian, so I wanted to keep the conversation up. It didn't work very well. This is the beginning of the clip, though, that I want you to see. I'm going to share screen with that. Hang on, I'm going to share the screen with.
Watch what eggs do to your old dog's body. Raw egg or cooked egg. It doesn't actually matter. Eggs are great for.
Taken place mainly in and around Pescara. It all began in 1956 and last for many years. The film clips and photographs that have emerged so far are of considerable interest, but even more extraordinary are the testimonies of the individuals involved. Everyone told their story, friendship, and that is the name that has come down to us today. Thanks to Stephano courage, one of the most awe-inspiring sagas in ufology has come to light. It wasn't an easy decision to decide to make it known.
It all started from an idea by Bruno Sammarchichia. He'd been thinking about writing down his experiences and then asked me to be the one to do it. And so I was at his house to record his stories. Then I put everything together.
Besides granting his dear friend's wishes, Roger had set himself another objective.
One reason is to hope that it might work as bait to encourage other people in the group to come forward.
Gaspare Galana and his wife Mirella are among those still alive today who were involved in the friendship events and who accepted Fletcher's invitation to come forward. They now live on the shores of Lake Como. Gaspare admired Stephano's courage to expose himself so directly, despite being a well-known figure in science and academia. He had no hesitation about exposing himself, and I admired him for that.
E quindi è stata di espormi
And so coming out and talking about my experience becomes easy for me because it gives me great joy. The joy of being able to tell people something that can help them understand more, or make their doubts grow or disappear, or strengthen their belief. Gaspare Delano became a fan of ufology in the late 40s, and, together with his wife, sought a path to greater awareness. Even Gaspare's mother took part in the events.
Gaspare, his mother Zita, and I had finally achieved our goal, which was to get to know them. We were hoping for an experience with teachers to help us.
In the friendship story, Amicizia called the beings by the name of W56. They weren't a single race, but a group of extraterrestrial beings coming from different parts of the universe. Although they looked like humans, there were considerable differences in height, which ranged from 1 to 6 meters. The first encounter took place in April 1956. We know Amicizia was there, along with his 2 friends, Giancarlo and Giulio.
Bruno said that an old friend had given him this pension because Bruno collected antiques. And while looking at it, they noticed it was a map of the castle of Astorno at Roccapia. It seemed to be a kind of treasure map, so they decided to go and take a look at the area. They went there more than once without ever finding anything in particular, until one night when they came across at a certain point, these 2 came out in a path that runs around the castle, introduced themselves, and started to talk. It was particularly short, about 1 meter in height, and the other tall, 2.5 meters, something like that. As for the rest, they looked like normal people.
But what happened in that encounter? According to the eyewitnesses, the 2 aliens spoke perfect Italian. The thing that immediately struck them was the strong sense of love that emanated from these beings. The information they gave to Bruno, Giancarlo, and Giulio was awesome, to say the least. They said that Earth had been created for a positive purpose, and that man was turning everything into evil. But the morality level of humans was much lower than their own. They explained that this is a very critical moment in human history. Atomic weapons are capable of destroying the planet in a matter of minutes, a tremendous risk that could come to pass because of our low moral sense. Their task was to ensure that the situation didn't get out of hand. They said they weren't here to conquer, as there was nothing to conquer. But
why did Amazon send me $20,000? Because I use Amazon AI.
To experiment living with these 20 people. But the deal was that those 20 people could not argue and learn technology, which they called Ureda. And if you watch the whole entire, and you can do it yourself, documentary, you have to keep harmony or Ureda. That harmony, they said, was a technology that's used in the ships. So it was very interesting for me because I always knew that the ships were semi-biological, and you had to have a vibration that went with the ship. This is in a lot of what contactees have said. He's told me. And this Ureda was the technology they had. It was a harmony where the pilot becomes one with the ship. Now, I've heard that over and over again. So they told them, they said, we can stay with you. But the minute you begin fighting and the minute you begin disagreeing, we have to go home. we have to leave. And so you're guessing how long that took. And I interviewed not only in the documentary Gaspare di Lama, Paolo Di Girolamo, who was part of the group. He was in Rome, and he explained that too. Some of the characteristics of this was heavy teleportation, opening up of the base, where they explain, they actually show an animation, the base near Pescara, where they open up the ground and the base was under the ground. They did the same with the waters. They said the water base went all the way from Pescara to Bari, which is, they show it to you in the documentary, which means we're talking about underwater bases. And they explained to him. Now, Bruno Sammachicha, who's part of this, helped these beings because they lived in Roccapia in a castle. And the one that was almost 14 feet tall, he had to get a special bed for him. And Stephano was explaining to me, and I've heard this also with the Howard Menger group, the Venusians that came, that Bruno would have to foot the bill for a truckload of fruit for them to eat. He did foot the bill for a lot of what they were, living on the planet. And he said that they would take the truck, and you can see it actually in the documentary. And they would take the driver to a cafe, have him have coffee, and when he came out, the truck was empty because they did a lot of teleportation stuff. And there's witness testimony to this, so it isn't unusual. And he had to pay for the fruits. Now they also asked for some minerals, and they asked the Italians to give them some minerals to help them in that way. They also would talk to them on the phone. And because of this ureda, this harmony, the message was always, would you guys please stay together, foster harmony. I'm glad they didn't call it love, but they called it harmony. And so what Stephano gave me, which I'm going to have you hear, you don't have to see it, but you can hear it, or maybe I'll screen share it, is the actual voices of these beings talking. The first one is Di Pietro, because they had names, but they had names that the Italians gave them. A lot of the ETs have said, don't ask us our name because you couldn't pronounce it anyway, and don't even talk about the planets because we call them different things. But one of the ones that impressed me the most, and you're going to hear it, is Di Pietro saying, "Unita, unita, unita," which means unite, stay together, stay together. And I'm going to screen share so that you can hear him saying this. And because they talked on the phone, they talked on radios, they'd interrupt transmissions. And the same thing happened in Southern California, because what I was told from the survivors of the contacts in Southern California is that they use crystal radio and talk to the aliens all the time. They talk to the ETs all the time, because with crystal radio you can make it yourself, and you can't touch the channel. And so you're going to hear not CG, you're going to hear Gian Pietro, and Gian Pietro was the tall one, say unita, unita, unita. Now you might say, Paula, this is a recording of aliens. Yes, if you want it, I'll share it with you. I'll send it to you in an MP3 file. And then you're going to hear a telephone call where CG is talking to the wife of one of the contactees, and the wife of one of the contactees is he's speaking to her in French, which these beings spoke Italian, French, and I hear they spoke Russian also. And it's really interesting, because I don't think, looking at this, because I've heard of this so much, if you're in China, they speak Chinese. If you're looking at the telepathy tapes, which we just did a show on, Grant Cameron and I, the autistic kids the autistic kids are speaking in different languages without ever having gone to school. And how can they do that? And then I hear that the ETs can speak your language without ever having gone to school. So we need to start connecting some of these telepathic talents. We need to start opening up our world for consciousness to see that they are way evolved. They are way evolved, even with languages. So let's hear the two telephone calls. One is the first one is Di Pietro, the tall one, saying unita, unita, which means in Italian, unite, unite, unite. And the second one is Sigiers. I don't know if you understand French, speaking to one of the wives in French. To me, it's absolutely amazing.
Voi siate uniti, uniti, uniti.
You are united, stay united. And this is the phone call to speaking in French. And this is.
Voi siate uniti, uniti, uniti.
Pronto, Sigir? 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 Senti, ecco, di un saluto a Verena, se vuoi in francese, che tu sai tutte le lingue, come vuoi, eccola.
Ciao, Sigir.
Non si ritorna, io sono tanto chiaro.
Voi in che compra?
Ora aspetto, poi io appresso a te.
He said is thank you for sharing our reality. And in the fact, and when I heard this, well, I was with Stephano when he did his presentation for Michael Sala in Hawaii, and I heard the voices of these beings, very, strong voices. And the one French goes mon chéri, which means my dear. I realized that what was going on here was a tremendous amount of love and affection. In fact, even the documentary said that they felt an affection, a love, a bonding, and thanking the Italians for sharing the reality. And there's so much that they did together, but they didn't all 20 do them at the same time. This is the problem. When you have you have a radio going on saying, meet me at the ocean, and the others don't get to go, or you start fighting among yourselves, or this with communities, the human community did not stay together like they should. There's jealousies, there's all kinds of things. I felt really bad when I talked to Stephano because he said they weren't able to hold it together. There was all these misunderstandings. And so after 20 years, this federation, tall ones and the short ones, went home. And the same thing happened in Southern California because those Venusians went home. They went somewhere else. They went to Latin America. And I've talked about this before, because the only connection you can ever have with an ET is certainly not a cerebral one, certainly not one with the brain. You can have a heart connection. So you have to go to where people have the biggest hearts, or you can have a heart connection, a non-judgmental heart connection. So there's a lot of questions you probably have about this case, but I want to go to his PowerPoint, and some of the things I'll race through it. But I want to go to the PowerPoint that Stephano left me because it's very important that you see it's that he had so much. By the way, this is in the documentary. This is Paolo Di Girolamo, and he was a what do you call it, a cartoonist or graphic artist. There I am. And he said he wrote them a letter. He went there, and it's in the documentary. Paolo's in the documentary. And here I am sitting there talking to him. And he said something really interesting. He said, I was doing caricatures at the time. He said, and I was working for American Studios. And he said, I am positively sure. He said that some of those American studios, because we're talking about 1956 to 70s, he said, we're involved with Spielberg and Lucas, he said, because when Star Wars came out, he said it looks so familiar to what we had lived. So he, being in that field, and I'm wondering where some of these ideas come from. And he actually mentioned Spielberg and Lucas to me. So it was really, really, eye-opening for me to see that, to understand that. This is Stephano's PowerPoint. So you're going to see the PowerPoint, but I'm going to kind of race through it because it's so long. This is Stephano's PowerPoint on Amicizia. Here, this is Gaspare di Lama's own photographs of these black and white photographs. You can't do CGI in 1956. These are real photographs. Some of them, if you see it in the documentary, are over Milano. And they've got the movie over Milano, over buildings that I know of there. So, okay, Amicizia, these are all the words for friendship that Stephano had in different languages. This is, he said, people from Italy, Switzerland, Germany, France, Siberia, Argentina, Chile, all gave, because this didn't happen in Italy, it happened all over. And he talks about, this is Bruno Sammachicha in Montesilvano, and there is, in the documentary, this dog is looking out the window, looking at the UFOs. Dick is the name of the dog. And it's really interesting because they were talking about the fact that animals can sense this. In fact, when I was in Latin America with Ricardo Gonzalez, when the dogs would begin to bark, I knew there was a UFO in the air because it started with the dogs barking. I knew when there was something happening in Latin America. By the way, we had just talked about the Vatican. Look at this photo. This is, Carlo Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II. These guys know everything. There was a Vatican cardinal involved in friendship named Rossi. So, because Bruno Sammachicha wrote books on Catholicism. So, everybody knew. Of course, we weren't around, or I was around. I was in grade school, but we didn't know this was going on. This is, I'll go real fast because this is a language that they call themselves the Acri, or the old ones, or the sage ones. They didn't call themselves W56s. It was the Italians that called them W56s. W means victory, and 56 is the year that they were there. So they call themselves the Acri, or the the sage ones, like the masters. And then, what's his name? Stephano did all kinds of research, and he realized in hieroglyphics and in different languages, Acri means the same thing. It means the wise ones. So they were a confederation, and to them, our Earth has a mystical meaning because it is one among the only 15 mother planets that there is where life was born throughout the universe. That's what they told him. That was what they told him. So anyway, their bases were 20 kilometers from the surface. They had a lot deeper bases. Who knows why Italy was chosen as one of them. They spoke Italian, making mistakes. He had talked about that. this is an actual photo of Di Pietro. I don't know if you can see from my screen, but this big tall guy with the two arms is walking next to a regular human. This image, a Polaroid photo, shows Di Pietro appearing via some kind of remote control on the back of one of the Italian members of Amicizia. So they had a technology where they could transport, they could appear, disappear. They had, it was like almost a paranormal kind of thing. Okay, so in addition, Bruno was providing for them, and I had told you this, truckloads per month of fruits and fish, most of the time at his own expense, even though others of the group would contribute. So okay, so this is the area in Pescara near Roccapia, and this, okay, these are just things that he put. Let's see, these are photographs that were given to Stephano. There's one near the seashore. You can see how old this photo is, in the very center of town near Pescara. Here's this one. It blows me away because this one was analyzed in the documentary. Look how close to Milano to all the buildings. It has a dome, and this has the dome top. Here's another one over Pescara. You can see this. Here's two others. Some of these were taken by Gaspare di Lama. And look at these, a few of these look like the scout ships from Switzerland, but these are black and white photos of 1956, which is really interesting. Here's near the water. And this is all part of what Stephano gave me. He said that the black part on the top was a force field, because you can see underneath here, there is a dome, but the black part on the dome thing was like a force field. Here's the tree line. Here's another one. Here's most houses there weren't there 50 years ago, but the tree where you saw this, he said, is still in place. There's the tree. This is today, the area. So these photos for me, and he showed a whole bunch of them. Here's another one. Here's another one. They're on the internet, but people don't know that they belong to a friendship. They don't know that some of these are Gaspare di Lama pictures, and there are also Moody's. There's one almost landing. I don't know if you can see that. I'm hoping you can. Almost landing. There it is, almost landing also. This one is over the treetops. There's three of them north of Pescara in 1960. And this one here is, he didn't put the date of this one, but this is over like an industrial park. And then he's got several photos here. This is Aquila, which is right there. You can see the UFO in the sky. You can see that here. I mean, there's so many photographs. Very few people are aware that there was film of the event, and the film is now shown in public for the first time. Okay, it's in that documentary. If you want to see the film, the movie, I think it's 8mm. You can see it. Here's another one over Milano. This is from the film. It says here, the Bruno's dog was at times entering the stage. This film was taken through an open window. And if you see the documentary, the dog is barking, is looking at. So, okay, this is Roccapia. This is the castle. This is where they were housed. This has been put there. You could tell this has been put there. There's the old car. There's the entrance for Roccapia. He said it was a portal. Also, there's the car. Oh, they used the car, but because they were so tall, they took the front seats out of the car. They'll tell you they took the front seats out of the car, and Di Pietro would drive the car because he couldn't sit. He couldn't sit regular. This image shows plate of the car. not just the white rectangle in the picture, but its brightness. It has some enhanced saturation. Here's Rocapia. Here's one of the guys at Rocapia. This is interesting for me. This is one of the aliens. This is Kenya. He's not on the audio, but photos were taken of him. And because he was in a villa and they did the testing of how tall this guy was, that's a regular human being. And this is Kenya. Now, is this unusual? Absolutely not. In the Latin American with Ricardo Gonzalez and those guys, Antarel is over 10 feet tall, over 10 feet tall. In another case in Italy, in Genoa, the beings were 15 feet tall and they have the footprints. So you have to look at the fact that we have our own idea of aliens or ETs or how tall they should be. But this guy, Kenya, looks like a regular person, except he's super tall. I mean, I don't see, this is an actual photo of one of them. They were not always as tall as that. More often than not, they were average height. And on the cover of Mass Contacts, there's another photo done with 2 glass plates of one of them, of one of these people. And it says here, belongs to group of images, 2 different half photos joined together. So there you go. I mean, did they take photos? You say, did they take photos? They allowed themselves to be photographed. The W-56s were fighting with a group that they call the CTRs, or the contrary. The CTRs, and there's an image of what they call it, were like artificial intelligent androids that were of the opposite spirituality. And not only did Bruno talk about that, but Stephano talked about that. They thought these people would get to humans before they would, and they warned us against it. And that's why they were trying to do it. Samples of their voices, I let you hear them with the 2 W-50 speaking. First, Di Pietro, the master of the, and then Sigier speaking French then Italian with the group. You heard that. Di Pietro has made a clamor in Italy, unfortunately poorly translated to English. He doesn't speak good Italian. He says, non tradite la nostra, don't betray our reality and nor our loyalty. Because of course it's going to be top secret, of course. The telephone conversation between the professor in Rome, he called the Italians Umites. The whole Umita thing, Umites, date back to Ibiza and the fact that there was a case on the Spanish islands of ETs that would call themselves Umites. And so Stephano did his homework and really, he said they had writing too. He talked about the writing. This was the writing. And he compared it to other writings. This was these were the bases on the Adriatic coast, and he has a map, and they show it to you actually in the documentary. Oh no, he went to Chile. This is the Chiloan case that I talked to. This is the Archipelago. These are the islands of Chiloé. And I told you I interviewed Octavio Ortiz. There he is, talking to them on the phone. And Fuentes, who actually went to the island of Chiloé. So Stephano put all of these cases together. The thing is this is 1985. So when Chile signed a peace agreement with Argentina. So this is a whole different case, but it's called friendship also. The peace agreement that was signed between Argentina and Chile was called friendship. This is an incredible photo. There's George Adamski, there's Council at Patago, and this is in Italy. Adamski went to Italy. He went to share the message from Orthon that he got in Landers in in Landers, California, Southern California, where the Integratron is. You know, he met Orthon, and there's even a little monument there in Desert Center. I went there. I saw the little monument. On top of it all, he met Orthon, but Orthon put his feet down on the ground. So Desmond and Leslie took plaster casts of the shoes. So these things didn't happen. And I met Desmond and Leslie when I met Colonel Corso. And he told me, he said, these were human type beings, and they were warning against nuclear war. They were saying that there couldn't be separation. People had to come together to save this planet. And that the same message, except that Adamski was 1953. He met Orthon, 1952, 53. This was in 1956. Stephano put the picture of me and Paolo Di Girolamo because he was surprised I went there. He was one of the 20 people. So I spoke to 2 of the 20. Both these guys are dead. Both of them, he said, my friend Paolo had written a book on this, Us and Them. The book is going to be printed in Spanish and English. My theory is this. This is the way I feel, because we're coming to an end. If you're going to study this case, and you want to study the details, where there's no mistakes and nobody's throwing crazy statements out there, you have to read the books. This one is a little hard to read, but it has the best photos, and it has the photo on the cover. This is a recap that Stephano did, and there's a picture of Di Pietro in the back, and some kind of infrared thing that they took. And then what you do is then you get the second witness's book, and then there's so many online interviews with Gaspare di Lammerle Como, so many. All of Italy went to talk to him. I was lucky to be able to go, and I have 2 YouTube interviews, if you can just have patience, because he's talking to me, and then I didn't have an interpreter, so I had to wait, and then I interpreted what he said. Like you heard me say, there were women there. I heard there were 10 guys, but it was 20, and there were women involved. Well, naturally, I mean, when I talked to Ottavio Ortiz, his wife was more enthusiastic about TNT than he was. Ottavio was asked to sell everything, wife and kid, to come on the island of Chiloé. He went down to the port twice, the harbor, and chickened out. and he told me this personally. It's on the YouTube video. So do these beings want to take a chance and see if they can experiment living with humans? Yes. Is it done today? We'll never know. We'll never know, because when it's happening, you can't write a book. Stephano had to, it was 1956, and he wrote the book in 1990. So you're not going to do it while they're still around. People have asked me about the Charles Hall case that I did, Tall White Aliens in Area 51. I was the one to do that case. I took him to Indian Springs. You honestly think he could talk about it if they hadn't moved those people? If the government hadn't moved those people, and they moved them somewhere else, because when I did the case, everybody was camping there. They wanted to see them. And so you have to use logic. What I was concentrating on for the last, since 2014, other than Trinity, the first crash, the book I did was Jacques Vallée. Other than Trinity, I was concentrating on all the visitations of human that look like us people on the planet that had tried to integrate with humanity. If you listen to people that are wise, they'll say they're among us already. They certainly are. They certainly are. And the reason why I know this, I talked to some researchers like Timothy Good, and he told me, I asked him, did you ever see them? He said, yeah, in a hotel in London, there was a man, he said, dark black hair. So they're not all blonde with beautiful blue eyes that look like angels. He said there was a guy opposite me in a hotel lobby, and I had a feeling he wasn't from here. So I said, this is Timothy Good, the greatest researcher. He said, if you're not from here, take your index finger and put it on the left side of your nose. And he did just that. He folded up his newspaper and he walked out. When I was working on Adamski, because I had to go back to the Giant Rock days, I asked Michel Zerger in Tokyo. He's French, and he's in Tokyo, and he did all the books on Adamski, and he bought all of the archive of George Hunt Williamson. The book that Zerger wrote is called, everybody should have it, it's called We Are Here, Visitors Without Passports. And I asked Zerger, I said, and Zerger said to me, Paula, when I was working on George Adamski, and I remember he's in Tokyo married to a Japanese woman, but he's French. He said, we were in a Starbucks type place in he said it was not even 19, it was 2021. He said, and this beautiful blonde guy walks in, and he said, mentally, I thought to myself, I wonder, he said, if this guy isn't from here. And then he continued with his wife, eating, and this guy had bought a latte. And on the way out, he gave Michel Zerger a napkin, and on it in French, I don't know how he could know that Michel Zerger was French. He put, Nous sommes ici, we are here. And I said, Michel, they did it because if you're working on their case, they know you're working on their case. It's happened to me, weird things have happened to me. If I'm working on a case, that particular entity or those groups let you know they know you're working on their case. So for me, that was amazing. So when I went to Tokyo last year, and I'm in love with Japan with the Japanese, I made him show me where it was and so forth, because this is an ET that walked in and said, we are here. That's the title of Michel's book. We Are Here, Visitors Without Passport. So there are so many questions. There are so many stimuluses behind this. There's so many, but you can't just have an opinion, say, what do you think of friendship? Oh, it's a hoax. You can't do that. You've got to read the books as a scholar. You've got to study the individual case. Now, Stephano, when he did the PowerPoint, he wanted to compare it to Chile because that was called friendship too. And because they tried, Octavio was invited to come and be on the island with them, on the archipelago of Chiloé. And there, yes, on YouTube, there's the whole story, you can find it. But to me, the idea that human type beings, human type races have tried to give us their spirituality and their consciousness, because the W56 has said, if you keep Ureda, we can stay here. If you keep harmony, we can stay here. When I did the Giant Rock stuff, the channeling that Robert Short did for us in 2014 was the end of separation. We cannot separate. We need to come together. That vibration of coming together, all races, all colors, all species, all animals, all plants, is a vibration. And I began to understand that. Of course, we live in challenging times, so I'm not even going to go there. But if you can understand, that is what the philosophy of evolved people is. Evolved people do not separate. Evolved people try to have a communication. Those telephone calls just touch my heart, that they're talking to the wives in French and calling them mon chéri. It's for me, it was mind blowing. Can I share some of it? Yes, I'm willing to share the phone calls. You can text me. Of course, I've given you the books. I've given you the links. You should go on my YouTube channel and look up even my interview with Michel Zerger from Tokyo, and know that anything I do has to go to the source. I can't have it come second hand. It was not easy going to Lake Como. I wasn't going on vacation. I had to pay for the thing all myself. And it's so sad because Gaspar has passed on, and so is Paulo Di Girolamo. But I got to them in time to get the witness testimony from the actual people. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and you can ask me questions. And I hope you watch with your families, because they're telling the truth, the documentary that I give you the link to.